Picture this. It's a freezing, snowy winter night in Paris, 1760. You've just walked into the grand, beautifully lit salon of Madame de Pompadour, who happens to be the most powerful woman in all of France. The room is absolutely packed with the elite of European society. We're talking aristocrats, philosophers, top-tier diplomats. But here's the thing, nobody is paying attention to each other. Every single eye in that room is fixed on one impossible man. He's sitting right near the fireplace, dressed head to toe in black silk, and he's covered in a literal fortune in diamonds. I mean, they're scattered casually across his buttons, his buckles, his fingers. This is the Count of Saint-Germain, and he's about to pull off the greatest disappearing act in history. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to unpack the incredible mystery of a man who claimed to conquer time itself.
So the conversation in the salon turns to this forgotten 50-year-old political scandal from the reign of the previous king, Louis XIV. The man in the black silk just smiles. He starts describing the scandal, but he's not just listing public facts. He's describing the precise color of a specific duchess's dress, the exact word-for-word exchange of a private conversation, and even what the gardens at Versailles smelled like that particular afternoon. Well, an elderly woman in the room, the Countess de Gergy, literally goes pale. She was actually young when this scandal happened, and she remembers it. She stares at this unaging man who honestly looks no older than 40 and whispers that he speaks as if he had been there. He just calmly looks back and replies, "But of course, madam, I was there." When she does the quick mental math and realizes that would make him nearly 100 years old, he simply states that he is very, very old. Before anyone can even begin to interrogate him, he just bows, walks out of the salon, and completely vanishes into the snowy Parisian night.
So who exactly was the immortal Count of Saint-Germain? You guys, this is the ultimate historical whodunit. We are tracking a guy who just seemed to pop out of thin air in Venice around 1710. He shows up as a mature, wildly wealthy aristocrat with absolutely no past, no family, and zero childhood records. And then, for the next 70 years, he just dazzles the highest courts of Europe, apparently without aging a single day. Today, we're going to dig into the undeniable, hard evidence of his genius, right alongside his incredibly bizarre claims of immortality.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, The Impossible Man and His Resume of Miracles.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it shows why the greatest minds of the 18th century couldn't just brush him off as some crazy person. You have to look at his actual documented resume. The sheer scope of his linguistic mastery was, well, it was staggering. The Count of Saint-Germain didn't just know a few handy travel phrases to get by. He spoke at least 12 languages with absolute native-level fluency. We are talking perfect idiom, perfect grammar, without even a hint of an accent. Now sure, an educated European noble back then might know French and Latin, right? But Saint-Germain was casually conversing in Arabic, Chinese, and Sanskrit. Those are languages that required years of total on-the-ground immersion in distant lands. Scholars were just completely baffled by how one single man could possess this level of global fluency in the 1700s.
And you know, his genius wasn't just limited to languages. He was an undeniable virtuoso on the violin. He'd draw these massive crowds who swore he was among the best musicians they'd ever heard in their lives. On top of that, he was a painter who actually invented his own highly vivid pigments that absolutely stunned art experts of the day. And if that wasn't enough, he was an incredibly advanced chemist and alchemist. He actually famously demonstrated to King Louis XV that he could seemingly melt away the flaws from raw diamonds, massively multiplying their value. The guy possessed an education that honestly should have taken multiple lifetimes to acquire.
Which brings us to this staggering number right here, 0. That is the exact number of public meals the Count of Saint-Germain was ever recorded eating. Think about that for a second. In the 18th century, high society totally revolved around these massive, lavish, multi-course dinner parties. Saint-Germain would show up, he would be the life of the party, conversing brilliantly with everyone, but he would never, ever let a single bite of food pass his lips. He claimed ordinary food was crude and actually shortened your lifespan. Instead, he apparently sustained himself entirely on this mysterious brew he created himself, a special tea and an elixir of life. Now, whether he was just intentionally cultivating his own immortal legend, or maybe he was just terrified of 18th century poisoners, which is fair enough, it definitely made him impossibly mysterious.
Moving right along to Section 2, The King's Secret Agent.
Okay, let's dive into this, because beneath all the parlor tricks and the flashy diamonds, there was a very real and honestly very dangerous political reality to Saint-Germain's life. He wasn't just a fun party guest. He had unprecedented, completely untraceable access to the absolute most powerful rulers in Europe. And this concept right here on the screen, this is what unlocks so much of the mystery. Le secret du roi,
The king's secret. King Louis XV was fascinated by Saint-Germain. He even gave him private apartments at the magnificent Château de Chambord, which was a privilege pretty much strictly reserved for princes. Why on earth would he do that? Because Saint-Germain was actually acting as the king's personal shadow diplomat and spy. This was an entirely secret intelligence agency operating totally behind the backs of France's official ministers. And it perfectly explains his endless wealth, his constant border hopping across Europe during times of war, and of course, why he could never, ever reveal his true identity.
Just look at how this guy operated. He's like a ghost slipping through the courts of Europe, from his sudden, unexplained emergence in Venice in 1710 to suddenly getting arrested in London as a suspected Jacobite spy in 1743. Fast forward a bit and he's the absolute darling of Versailles in the 1750s, totally protected by the king. But, as with all good spy stories, his luck runs out. In 1760, a secret peace mission in The Hague goes terribly wrong, and he manages to seriously anger the official French foreign minister, the Duc de Choiseul. Now hunted and exposed, Saint-Germain is forced to flee France for good. He ends up just wandering Europe until his official death is finally recorded in Germany in 1784.
Section 3. Investigating the theories. So, who was this man really? For literally 2.5 centuries, historians, police, genealogists, you name it, they've all desperately tried to unmask him. Let's put on our detective hats for a second and break down the prime suspects. The absolute most persistent historical theory is that he was the secret son of Prince Francis II Rákóczi. Now, Rákóczi was a Hungarian rebel prince hiding from the mighty Habsburg Empire. This theory is great because it perfectly explains why Saint-Germain was so highly educated, why he had such incredible noble bearing, and why he absolutely had to keep his identity a secret, right, to avoid political assassination. The only problem, the timeline of the prince's children doesn't perfectly match Saint-Germain's apparent age, and, frustratingly, we still lack any definitive documentary proof.
But wait, what if he was just pulling the ultimate scam? That's theory number 2. He was a spectacularly brilliant 18th century grifter. And hey, this makes a lot of sense of his wild, exaggerated claims of immortality and his theatrical alchemy. But there is a really massive flaw in this theory. Usually con men eventually slip up, and more importantly, they usually want to steal your money. But Saint-Germain, he never defrauded anyone. His wealth was completely independent. Plus, his language skills and musical talents were undeniably genuine, and he wielded massive, actual political influence. Even Casanova, who was a famous con man himself, met Saint-Germain and was deeply unsettled by how profoundly knowledgeable the guy actually was. Takes one to know one, right? Except Casanova couldn't figure him out either.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core tension of our explainer today. We'll call it the paradox of Saint-Germain. On one hand, you have these utterly absurd claims. I mean, he would casually drop into conversation that he was over 300 years old, or that he used to be personal friends with the Queen of Sheba, or that he was literally physically present at the wedding at Cana when Jesus turned water into wine. It sounds like pure madness. But then, you have the undeniable proof on the other side. He genuinely spoke 12 languages natively, he was a deeply connected intelligence agent, and his massive wealth was incredibly real.
His deception was so perfect, the act so totally impenetrable, that it actually worked on the smartest minds of the Enlightenment. Just look at this quote from Voltaire. This is the arch-rationalist, a man who literally made his living mocking superstition and championing hard science. Yet even Voltaire was forced to marvel at him, writing in 1760, "He is a man who never dies and who knows everything." I mean, if Saint-Germain could impress the ultimate skeptic of the era, his performance was nothing short of an absolute masterpiece.
Section 4. An immortal mystery.
But what exactly happens when an immortal man actually dies? We do know that in 1784, his death was officially recorded in Germany while he was living with his close friend, Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel. But, as you might guess, death was hardly the end of the Count of Saint-Germain. Just 5 years after his official death, right in the middle of the bloody chaos of the French Revolution in 1789, he is repeatedly spotted in Paris. A lady-in-waiting swore she saw him, completely unaged, desperately trying to warn Queen Marie Antoinette of her impending doom. And it didn't stop there. Throughout the 19th century, well-dressed men matching his exact description kept popping up in Vienna and Milan, only to vanish before the police could investigate. And by the time we hit the modern era, mystical movements like Theosophy, led by Madame Blavatsky, had literally adopted him as an ascended master, this spiritual being of light guiding human evolution. The legend completely, entirely swallowed the historical man.
To put that into perspective, it has been over 250 years since we first began trying to unmask this man. Just think about that.
Even today, with all of our modern research tools, digitized police archives, massive genealogical databases, he still beats us. If his ultimate goal was to become a permanent enigma, to be a living question mark that outlives any mortal life, well, his success was absolute.
And I think this is exactly why his story still matters so much to us today. The Count of Saint Germain isn't just some historical oddity you read about in a textbook. He represents the ultimate human fantasy. Let's be real, most of us are kind of chained to our pasts, right? Our mistakes, our family histories, where we grew up. But Saint Germain, he walked free. He successfully executed a total reinvention. He proved that it's possible to entirely erase your past and become exactly who you choose to be, and to do it so convincingly that you fool the kings and philosophers of Europe.
He basically traded his true identity for immortality, and in doing so, he achieved exactly what he set out to do. He became a mystery that will never, ever die. Which leaves me with one final thought for you to take away from this explainer today. If you were given the chance to completely erase your personal history, to just walk away from your past and become a permanent, immortal living legend, would you take it?